As more and more Americans call for a ceasefire, the Biden administration is starting to feel the political heat. Mass protests continue across the country, and some celebrities are beginning to use their platforms to call for a ceasefire. Annie Lennox called for one at the Grammys just the other day. Let's take a look.
Marches for ceasefire, peace in the world.
This comes as the Globe and Mail reports that Secretary of State Antony Blinken is embarking on a diplomatic tour of the Middle East today, meeting with Egyptian leaders as part of his efforts to secure a ceasefire in Gaza in exchange for the release of hostages. But although Blinken is getting more and more heat, as is the Biden administration, to recover the Israeli hostages, official American policy is still focused on providing Israel with funding and military, regardless of how it's used, and despite pushback against what is increasingly being viewed as a genocide in the region. Late last month, White House spokesman John Kirby denied there was a genocide in Gaza. Let's take a look.
I want to be very clear, and I know I've said this a million times, and you're all probably sick of me following up on this, but that doesn't mean that we excuse any single innocent life lost. The right number of civilian casualties is 0, but there's no indication that we've seen that validates a claim of genocidal intent or action by the Israeli Defense Forces.
Thank you.
Here to discuss the intricacies of a potential ceasefire and what American policy should look like vis-a-vis this conflict is Dr. Jeffery Sachs, professor at Columbia University. Dr. Sachs, welcome back to Rising.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Can you maybe just start by framing up what the stakes are as the ceasefire is attempted to be negotiated? The focus, I think rightly so, is on the exchange of hostages, but much of the framing that you see in the mainstream suggests that Hamas is being unnecessarily stubborn in giving up hostages. What is it that they see as necessary to get in return in order for such a hostage exchange to be beneficial?
There's a fundamental issue at play, and that is who rules the Palestinian lands. This is the basic issue, and it's been the basic issue for 57 years, since the 1967 war. Under international law, repeated votes of the UN Security Council and repeated votes of the UN General Assembly, there is to be a Palestinian state. The Palestinian state is to include Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. This is clear, and it's been clear for more than 50 years. The Israeli government completely rejects this. This is an extremist government, ultra-extremist, ultra-right-wing, filled with biblical zealots also, who believe, well, this land was given to the Jewish people according to the book of Joshua 2,500 years ago, and we're not discussing anything else. And so this government wants to rule over 7 million Palestinian people. This has been the crux of this issue for 57 years. And talking about a ceasefire without talking about the real issue at stake here is why the U.S. government completely fails to accomplish anything. It's pathetic. But the reason is that it abides by the Israeli government, even though this is an absolutely extremist government that is completely isolated in the world and that violates international law. So either the United States decides it's not going to fund and provide the munitions for a war based on those principles, or it's going to basically enable this extremist Israeli government to try to carry out these aims. If it does the latter, which is the current approach, it just means unending war. That's all. It's actually quite straightforward, but it's not, of course, the way that Biden wants to describe it or Blinken wants to describe it. They do not want to tell the truth to the American people that Israel has the most extremist right-wing government in its history and that it has a basic policy which prevents peace.
Well, let me give the
Israeli government perspective, and then you can respond to that. You called it an unending war. What if they say, well, I mean, and they have said, you can dispute that this is correct or that this is their actual agenda, but they've said, well, the war will end when Hamas is defeated, when its military leadership has been killed or forced into exile, and then there will not be a permanent troop presence in the region, but this will continue, this war effort, until the terrorist group that attacked Israel is utterly defeated, akin to past efforts the U.S. engaged in World War II to totally wipe out enemy government that we were at war with. It didn't end until they were totally defeated. That's what Israel has said. So where's the flaw in that declaration?
Robbie, what Israel is saying is something completely different. Of course, it's also good to listen to what they say in Israel itself. What they're saying is very clear. Yes, we want to defeat Hamas, but we will continue to govern all of what they call Eretz Yisrael. We will continue our dominance over Gaza, over the West Bank, over East Jerusalem. There will never be a Palestinian state. That's what they're saying in every rally. That's what they're saying in every press conference. That's what they're saying in every speech. That is in the party platform of every member of this government. This is not about Hamas. This is about what they call Greater Israel. To my mind, it is devastating for Israel. It's completely against international law. It means, at best, apartheid rule on an ongoing basis, but de facto what they want, and again, no secret, they want ethnic cleansing. Okay, you don't like it, you leave. This is what they write. This is what they publish. This is what they speak. And it's so vulgar. We're defending it, though. And not only defending it, we're arming them. And now the Senate wants us to pay $16 billion for more of this. It's completely shocking. But the administration doesn't tell the truth about anything, so they don't tell the truth about what this Israeli government is really saying. But it's very easy to find all the facts online. It's very easy to find it in the ruling of the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. It's very straightforward, because in Israel, they don't hide any of this. It's very explicit. And this is the trap. We are an accomplice, at a minimum, to the ethnic cleansing attempt, to the displacement of 2 million people, to the killing of around 30,000 so far, 70% of whom are women and children. And what do we hear? We hear from that clown Kirby, who, sorry to say, he never tells the truth about anything, but he doesn't tell the truth about this either. He said that the International Criminal Court application was meritless before reading a word of it. And then the court ruled, and then afterwards, he just tries to dismiss it in one sentence. What kind of government do we have? It's so unserious.
We have recently heard reporting that Joe Biden pays a lot of attention to Joe Scarborough's show, Morning Joe, so much so that people in his staff try to get important news stories in front of him by funneling them through Joe Scarborough's reporting. And I caught a segment yesterday in which even he was saying, as someone who very much believes we should always support Israel, that because Netanyahu is so right-wing and that he is so reviled even within Israel, that Biden has to start distancing himself from Netanyahu. And it does seem that increasingly folks are turning on Biden as the electoral consequences of his commitment to standing with not just Israel, but with Netanyahu's most right-wing extremist version of Israel is hurting him in the polls. And yet, we haven't actually seen any changes from Joe Biden. Of course, as you just referenced, there is this new aid package which contains over $14 billion worth of aid, additional aid for Israel.
And $60 billion for Ukraine.
Right. And so I guess the fundamental question here is it reasonable? Is it legitimate to think that there's anything at this point that could move Biden on this issue? If Morning Joe can't do it, what, if anything, do you think could cause there to be an actual policy shift with respect to Biden's approach to the conflict?
The entire world, other than the United States and Israel, are lined up on the other side. It's unbelievable. I spent a lot of time at the United Nations. There was a vote on political self-determination for the Palestinian people. All the countries voted yes, except for 4. What are the 4? Israel, the United States, Micronesia, which a tiny country which under compact has to vote with the United States, and Nauru, a country of 12,000 people in the Pacific. All the rest of the world is on the other side. This is absolutely devastating for U.S. foreign policy, U.S. interests around the world, and incidentally, for Israel. This is so dangerous for Israel, the fact of this absolutely extremist, right-wing, religious nationalist government. You cannot overestimate the dangers because they're existential. This government is leading Israel to ruin. So it's not a matter of backing Israel or not backing Israel. If Israel wants to survive, it cannot have the vision of permanent dominance over the Palestinian people. And it doesn't even make a secret of it. And what's so interesting is under the Genocide Convention, which the International Court of Justice is ruling, intent is one of the key pillars of a finding of genocide. And the government officials like Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, Netanyahu himself, and others are explicitly feeding into genocidal intent. They talk about ethnic cleansing. They talk about Gaza being uninhabitable. They talk about the permanent rule over all of the territories which they call Judea and Samaria. They call Greater Israel. They don't hide any of it. It's only Kirby who hides things, or the Biden administration who hides things. And the more the American people find out the truth about this extremism, the more it turns our stomachs. The public is against support of Israel for these purposes. And yet it continues day by day. The deeper problem, I want to say, is that this group, and it's true in Ukraine, it's true in the Middle East, they don't care what the American people think. They don't even care what the rest of the world opinion thinks. They think it's none of our business. But the fact of the matter, it is our business, and this is also an election year, and this is deeply unpopular.
Professor Sachs, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you. Thanks a lot.